wouldn't it be great if your knowledge could help as many people as possible and that they could pay what it's worth, and so that you could sort of receive this the benefits of this broad-based knowledge that you possess.
I'm Junaid Ahmed, host of Hacks and Hobbies podcast and a digital presence advisor at HumbleZone. This episode is brought to you by Home Studio Mastery. I launched a consultation and course program to help podcasters and course creators to create a space in their homes that'll reduce the friction of creating content and appearing their best when showing up on camera. The pandemic gave us a lot of issues, but this one is here to stay. We're now so much closer to our audience thanks to video becoming more popular and affordable. I help guide folks who want to create Hollywood-worthy studios to not only capture great content, but also build more confidence, more authority, and be more comfortable in front of the camera. If I can do it, you can too. And with my help, you can do it faster. So if you'd like to learn more, visit homestudiomastery.com and how you too can create a home studio that brings out your personality, professionalism, and possibilities. Thank you for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. We're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life who want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around. Today I get to speak with Noah Healy. He's a market designer and game theorist working on better economic systems. After training in nuclear engineering, he worked with tech startups at the peak of the dot-com boom. Becoming fascinated by the mathematics of information and computation led to patent work on a better commodity, market design. It was so much fun talking with Noah on this episode, and I can't wait for you to listen to his origin story and how he got started. Let's jump right into this episode. Noah, thank you so much for jumping on and being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So Noah, we met through a really amazing podcasting network application, podmatch.com, which is a really powerful platform. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started into being being in the space that you are today.
Sure. Well, I describe myself as a recreational mathematician, algorithm developer, marketplace design consultant. That's the order it happened in. Recreational math was the first step for me. I've always had a facility for computation, found mathematics enjoyable. In my childhood, it was mostly reading. I was fascinated both by sort of the hard science fiction, sort of the Silver Age, 50s and 60s, and sort of the concepts of mathematics. But instruction doesn't really give you an insight into how to do those things. So you learn arithmetic. Once you've learned arithmetic, you can just do arithmetic problems. There's no sort of extra mystery there. And it turns out that the key is asking interesting new kinds of questions, which I had never really, that hadn't been given to me. But learning new mathematical tools was sort of endlessly fascinating. And so that was a thing that I was doing. Once I got out of school and college, I needed to get a job, and dot-coms were hiring because it was the 2000s. So
Yeah.
I jumped into that and learned an entirely new kind of mathematics around algorithms. Discovered that I was at least as good at that as I'd been at geometry and arithmetic and that stuff. So jumped in, read the papers, but because that's an evolving field, I think, it became clear both that there was work to be done, that I could at least, you know, put some effort toward, if
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily always make progress, but also some very fascinating reading that would sort of be current. Like if you're learning geometry, you read Euclid,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of the main text. So close to a decade ago now, I had enough money in the bank. I decided to sort of take a sabbatical from regular work
Mm-hmm.
and take some time to just dive in to some of these algorithmic questions. And while working on a problem of information communication on networks, I found this approach through game theory to construct
Mm.
marketplaces. And once I analyzed that outcome, that's when I realized that I really had something of great value. And
Mm.
so started putting the pieces together of how to actually go on an entrepreneurial journey, turn it into a real tool that we use on a regular basis.
Man, that's really fascinating. So you started with recreational mathematics, and now why did you call it mathematic and arithmetic? Like you use two different terminology. What's the
Well,
main difference if most people don't know?
yes. So the math, the English call it maths because there's so many different topics, and one
Mm.
of the things that's really happened in the history of scientific and sort of philosophical advancement of the human species is discovering that different kinds of math are really the same thing.
Mm.
So Descartes, for example, came up with the Cartesian plane, which connects Euclidean geometry in a very direct way
Mm-hmm.
to algebra and the arithmetic of numbers. And pedagogy, particularly in the United States, was sort of set up for the space race and training people to be rocket scientists. And so you do arithmetic and then geometry and then trigonometry and then algebra, pre-calculus, calculus, and now you know calculus, you can be a rocket scientist.
Wow.
And those subjects are are distinct sets of tools, but again, because of the deep underlying connection that reason, algorithms, and so on have,
Mm-hmm.
there's all kinds of fascinating and frankly shocking connections between these things.
Yeah.
And so, as a child, sort of being presented these things, they were presented as these isolated silos. And you didn't really see how your times tables would wind up relating to algebra or calculus or geometry or combinatorics or some of these other subjects that came up.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you find those little tidbits, they were like really fascinating. But then once I'd sort of grown up and done enough reading to discover the 20th century mathematics, and that sort of these connections are the point, and that what makes mathematical tools so valuable to acquire
Mm-hmm.
is that deep connection. So sort of whatever real situation you're actually in, all of these tools are useful in that situation. You just
Wow.
may not be aware of how to make it work out that way. And so that within within Euclidean geometry, you can do calculus, you can do combinatorics, you can do computation, you can do arithmetic. Within arithmetic, you can do Euclidean geometry and other forms of geometry and calculus and everything else, and so on. That, if you're familiar with the computer concept of a compiler,
Mm-hmm.
that's a program that turns one bit of formalism into another bit of formalism that means exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That compiler concept is actually quite simple. And so within mathematics, you can effectively form a compiler in one discipline that will turn things within that discipline or things within other disciplines into things within that discipline or things within other disciplines. And those
Wow.
transformations create insights that can be very valuable.
Wow. So this is mind blowing for me because growing up, I studied mathematics and, arithmetic and addition, subtraction, all that stuff. But I didn't make the connection because ultimately they're all connected.
Well, it is hard to make that connection. I didn't make that connection. I read it.
Okay.
Serious geniuses whose names are carved upon history made those connections, and we
Of
get to
course.
read about
We
them.
get to read about them. The other thing that really stood up for me was pedagogy of American or the Western education was all designed to create rocket scientists.
Pretty much, yeah. So when Sputnik went up, if you've ever read Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff, he's a little
Hmm.
hyperbolic at times, but he handles the facts fairly decently.
Hmm.
When Sputnik went up, there was a radical, sort of crisis in the American political scene, and one of the core questions was sort of, how could the Soviets be beating us? And as usual with Americans, we decided that our kids were just dumb, and that was the problem. And so if we had dumb kids that
Hmm.
couldn't build rocket ships, because obviously children build rocket ships, that's how it works.
Yeah,
Um,
they do. I mean,
that that
it's like,
right. It's not like adults do these things. It can't be
right.
our fault
Hmm.
as adults. It's children that we were going to have to start teaching these kids how to build rocket ships. And there's very, they made a movie about him, Homer Hickam. He won. He got fascinated by rockets, and he and his friends in West Virginia
Hmm.
built rockets and wound up going to the National Science Fair and then winning at the National Science Fair because rockets were very topical and they did a good
Yeah.
job at it. But in particular, the Kennedy administration put together some groups that decided to figure out how we should be teaching our children, and they were groups of rocket scientists who decided that the world needs more rocket scientists, and
Mm.
therefore we need to figure out how to lay out a course of action to get kids to learn calculus, and that was the pattern.
Wow. So this started back in the 50s, right? Sputnik went up in 57 or
Yes,
something.
yeah, late 50s, early 60s, I think is when the recommendation was made, and then started filtering down through the Department of Education. I started in school in 1980, and by
Mm.
then things were pretty set up, that's how things were going. I have
Yeah.
5 younger siblings, some of them considerably younger than me, and
Mm.
stats is starting to become a thing that gets taught some. But the sort of basic spine of creation, where algebra, then geometry, then more algebra, then trigonometry, then
Yeah. Yeah.
calculus. That's the cycle, and maybe you can take something on the side of it. Maybe you can do something with computers, but like get back to
Mm.
calculus. We gotta we gotta
This is
build that moon rocket.
yeah. That's really fascinating because I do remember taking calculus, and I started around the same time you did for school, right? Wow, that's pretty fun. Okay, I love that. I love that origin story because it really, solidifies your passion for it, right? You've been passionate about it. You went into creating new things around it. And what was really fascinating was the algorithmic, like designing marketplaces using game theory, right? That's something that's really needed, especially with the metaverse on the verge of, evolving more and more. And what we've seen a lot of different market types of marketplaces for the past couple of decades, especially with gaming set up with the Xbox, and there's so many different games on that platform, and then Sony coming up, and now we have one of the largest gaming network, which is the Apple iOS devices, right? It's just fascinating how many games there are available on a daily basis.
It's true, and that's one of the things these, MMOs, massive multiplayer online games, the economics becomes a part of those things, as sort of a natural, sort of automatic system. And the
Yeah,
gaming companies have different responses to them, some quite evil, sadly.
of course.
In many cases, they try to actively discourage it.
Oh,
So
interesting.
this was a very common early response. So, for example, Diablo 2 was a initial massive online game, and one of the things that could happen within Diablo 2 is that you could find these incredibly rare, incredibly valuable items. Blizzard, who ran Diablo 2, was running servers that people were doing this on, and they
Hmm.
didn't want those items to be valuable in the real world, because
Oh,
then
interesting.
they could conceivably be on the hook for responsibility. So
Hmm.
if they have a server crash and it wipes out, you know, your character history, that's on them. That's bad. They don't like doing that. It's a bad customer experience. They're going to have to do something to cope
I
with.
think your microphone. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. However, if the market has spoken and you have three items that are each worth $400,000 and they have a
Hmm.
server crash and wipe out your character history, then suddenly you can sue them for $1.2 million because
Oh,
because they
because
wiped out $1.2 million of value.
of your value.
Right. Like, I own those things. And so
Yeah.
they're like, no, nobody owns anything. These are just bits on a board. It's cool that you like them. We're happy that you like them, but we don't want to do anything with any of this stuff.
Mm,
But when you get to more interactive games, suddenly that becomes a thing. I could go out and grind and find 400 wolf pelts, or
yeah.
I could get together with some friends and kill a dragon and trade its liver for 400 wolf pelts, and maybe that's a lot more fun for me or something. And
Yeah.
suddenly
Yeah.
you have an economy out of nowhere.
Mm,
And those systems can also get quite ridiculous. There was a instance at a game called Eve Online where they were transporting this stuff that was actually worth real money within the game, and a pirate raid occurred,
of course.
and that's completely legitimate within the game. One of the things pirates can do within the game is blow up a freighter, and if they
Mm,
blow a freighter up, it's like a coin flip whether the goods survive or don't survive.
yeah.
But it's a lot easier to blow up freighters than it is sort of not to. And so that was the plan by the pirates. They were like, okay, we know that these guys are transporting enormous amounts of money. We're not going to get anything if they actually succeed, so we'll just blow the freighter up, and if we win the coin flip, then we'll have like $500,000. Well,
Hmm.
the coin flipped the other direction, and $1 million in real cash valuable objects vanished. And
It
that
just
was,
vanished.
yeah, it was
Oh,
like,
interesting.
they just erased it because that
Because it
was
blew up.
because it
Okay.
blew up. That's what happened. What do you want from me? and and that happened. Like, it's there's nothing about the game. It's not like the
Hmm.
designers were like, oh cool, we're gonna make this happen. It was just like, we
Yeah.
set this thing up. You guys are allowed to do whatever you want to do. We aren't interfering with what you want to do. Go for it. And they went for it, and they were like, okay, well, thanks for that $1 million that you guys paid for this stuff.
We get to keep it, the
That's
company.
ours no matter what. And you need this stuff, so
Hmm.
somebody's going to have to pay another $1 million to get
Yeah.
that stuff
To
back.
get the stuff.
And this is how the world works. I mean, protect your
Yep.
stuff better next time, I guess.
No, that's really fascinating, and it shows that human behavior, no matter where you put human beings, they're gonna act the same way.
Right.
Be it in one country, another country, an island, online, virtually, human behavior is not gonna go away.
Well, that's the central thesis of game theory, is that you can abstract out interactions and
Mm-hmm.
strategies down to essentially interests and incentives. And so the behavior gets dictated by the strategic situations we find ourselves in,
Yeah.
and people sort of behave like people wherever. Uh, and so this actually points up some intriguing facts that come out of game theory, is that certain strategic situations create complex behaviors like altruism and so on, as effectively a self-interested behavior within them, which creates a interesting alternative view.
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges in genetic biology is working out where complex behaviors that don't seem to conform to Darwinian, competition survival could come from. And several people have done some Nobel laureate award-winning work
Mm-hmm.
on what is sort of non-cash economics, where situations themselves are set up in ways that encourage cooperation, altruism, and other things. And some of those situations are simple enough that they occur in nature. And
Mm-hmm.
so, under those circumstances, adopting and adapting towards cooperation and altruism and other even more complicated behaviors become
Mm-hmm.
something that's a reasonable goal state. And then when you take creatures like us, who are actually very good at communication and cooperation,
Mm-hmm.
out of the sample of species on this planet, and put us in novel situations, then you can get some very complicated outcomes as a result of that.
Wow, that's quite fascinating, and that's where you delved into game theory because.
Yeah, yeah. Using that as an approach for communication became something that looked like it ought to work, sort of an intuitive matchup of what if, instead of just agents sending signals, which might
Mm-hmm.
be, somebody calling you a phone, or might be, thermometer that's outside the house that's, transmitting the exterior temperature or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What if you structured a incentive matrix that made those things want to bring signals that were of value, and then
Mm-hmm.
you iteratively adjusted that matrix to measure how much value the signals had, and reward the more valuable and punish the less valuable,
Mm-hmm.
in order to curate a high value, high truth consensus picture of some real thing that you were actually interested in. And so then, once I had that in hand, the second piece was how to sort of turn it back upon itself. In computer science, we call this recursion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Create a system where, rather than one person's interest in having some particular coherent thing in place, was turned into a group interest in having coherent information that the group could pay for on an
Mm-hmm.
individualized basis, depending on how much value you received from the coherency, and was paying based on how much individual contribution to the conspiracy, to the coherency
The
that an
coherency, yeah.
individual made. So by being able to measure both value received and value offered, we would be able to distribute the costs and rewards in a way that makes it worth your time, trouble, cash,
Mm-hmm.
and effort to make the system operate cleanly,
Mm.
and then benefit from a cleanly operating system.
So how does this tie up with the new universe, the new technology that's been around? Well, I don't know if it's new, but the distributed ledger technology that's been around for about a decade and a half, maybe. Right? How
So
does it work cleanly
it's
with it
yeah, it's effectively independent of that.
mm-hmm.
So you can do this on that kind of ledger technology, and I'm
as
working
well?
with some
Okay.
people that are trying to launch systems like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can do it off that kind of ledger technology, and
Right.
I'm working with people that are trying to launch systems like that as well.
Okay.
What the ledger people are essentially coping with is the problem of centralized chicanery. This issue of right now, you trust your bank or your credit card company to handle money for you, but what if you didn't have to trust
Mm-hmm.
them?
Yep.
There was some sort of distributed mechanism that could provide that without the overhead.
Yeah.
But reputation is still a sound mechanism,
Yeah.
and we have many human institutions, from churches to governments and so on, that are fundamentally reputation based. And many small businesses, you build your name, you trade on that name, and so on.
Yeah.
So reputation isn't necessarily going away as a mechanism to enable a centralized trust network.
Okay.
But to the extent that you can dispense with it, there could be a savings.
Yeah. Yeah. That totally makes sense. I've been trying to keep up with you because you have a higher no, so I'm like half the stuff is it's not going over my head mainly because I do keep up with my tech readings and I do know it's a little bit I've gone through that tech path myself being taking taking to effect the programming and whatnot, but it's really cool to see an actual application and something when you evolve and you create solving an issue. So you're working on something really cool, a patent pending system that supersedes commodity markets. If you want to share a little bit more about it, I'd be happy to
Yeah,
learn.
yeah, sure. So the core idea is recognizing that there are three separate inputs required for a deal to occur: the good or service being provided, the cash required
Mm-hmm.
to to balance the deal, and the information required to negotiate, set, or determine the
Mm-hmm.
price at which this deal should occur. And for kind of social stability and economic optimization, what we would like to have is competition in each of these three things. And if you think about this from sort of a personal point of view, wouldn't it be great if every time you wanted to sell something, everyone on earth was competing to find you the best price and
Mm-hmm.
then turn their cash over to you once that best price had been found?
Yeah.
Or, contrarily, if you were buying something, wouldn't it be great if everyone was competing to find the lowest price that you could get and breaking their arms trying to get their product into your hand? The thing that's different from what has gone before is that third piece of where people have knowledge about where markets are heading, which is largely opinion, but can be
Mm-hmm.
correct.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if your knowledge could help as many people as possible and that they could pay what it's worth,
Mm-hmm.
and so that you could sort of receive this the benefits of this broad-based knowledge that you possess.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so what my system does is sets up what are effectively independent markets in each of these three things, within the market, people compete with each other to provide as much of that as possible. And then these three things are effectively bound together through a sequence of algorithms that allows the measurement and distribution of contribution and consequence.
So you're really bringing all of the stuff that you've learned over the past few years, past couple of decades even, and building this smart system.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's again, that's the amazing thing about mathematics is that it never goes stale,
Yeah.
and it's just always useful. So it's, if you sort of immerse yourself in pop culture or pick up some cool phrases or something,
Yeah.
um, in a couple of years, maybe nobody knows what you're talking about. And I remember I was talking to a guy a couple months ago. I was pointing out to him that at no point in human existence did most people speak the same language.
Yeah.
So if you learn a language, most of the people who are alive aren't going to speak it with you. And certainly most of the people who, with historical access, most written works won't be in the language that you learn. But mathematics, every time you learn something that's a part of math and works, everyone else who's ever exposed to that's going to learn the same thing,
Yeah.
and every piece of math you ever encounter is going to relate back and be helped out by that particular thing.
Oh, so it's really a stacking of knowledge bases throughout time, and literally the terminology on shoulders of giants. Can you do?
Absolutely, yes, yeah. And going back to that, Newton and Leibniz both worked out the calculus at roughly the same time. But one of the major projects of, I guess, 17th century mathematics was developing a calculus that the rest of us could actually use.
Hmm.
And then one of the major projects of 18th century mathematics was coping with a niggling little problem at the very core of calculus, and really trying to get a firm grasp and handle on what continuity meant and didn't mean, and so on. And that opened up an entire vista in infinite processes and functional transformation that you can see very directly relates to the kind of infinite processes
Yeah.
and direct translation that our computers engage in. So, like this system that we're using, we're going to turn it off, but it's
Exactly. It's still
it's not
running.
really supposed to be turning itself off. It's just going to go.
Exactly. Man, we've had some really awesome conversation. I'm blown away. I mean, I can't even remember. Can't remember the last time I got so we got to. I mean, we didn't go that deep, but there was some depth in the conversation that we just had. Really fascinating. You know, all the best on launching your, all the best on getting the patent for your system, because once that's settled, then you can just really go all out and market what you can do and the systems that you can create for people. And I think jumping on top of Web 3.0 and building this into that community base, because there's a lot of community involved when you're creating systems like this. I mean, there's communities of WoW people that are talking to each other, not only through gaming, but also on other boards, because guess what? They get to do the stuff that they love to do, but also, really bring a kind of like a life into something brand new.
Quite true. Yes. Again, that sort of people being people thing. The people want to build community, want to have those sorts of connections
Yeah,
around what they love and what they do. And so hobbies, economics, politics, all of these things sort of bleed into each other
yeah,
constantly.
Absolutely do. All right, so share with the audience 3 hacks to take away so they can apply it to their lives.
Well, so I guess my first one would be read, learn things. You don't have to learn mathematics, although I would strongly recommend that one. It's great. It's a lot of fun. People don't believe that, but try it out. It
Yeah,
really is. That's that's pretty good.
yeah.
I guess number two, curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Hand in glove with reading and learning stuff. When the situations that we're in today are are sort of accumulated over centuries, and we're at a real turning point in the technological capabilities that we have with global communication,
Yeah,
computer assistance. All these things not merely didn't exist but wouldn't really be conceivable to the people that created the systems that we actually are today.
because of what we know with mathematics.
Right,
And
right.
yeah,
And what we've built out of those things that we know.
right.
So,
Dig back into, I guess, the things that make your day-to-day life up. Get curious about your routine and see if there's a thread, and if you can't see it, you can't see it. Probably no harm done.
Yeah,
But look around, and if you find this thread and you can tug on it and find something that fixes it or makes it better, it's really, that's fantastic.
yeah.
um, and and the third one, once, if you've done these things, once you're sure of your ground, open up your mouth and talk about it. It's a process. It's definitely scary to step outside your comfort zone,
Oh yeah,
but people don't bite for the most part, and they're interesting and interested once you have something to present.
yeah.
So I've been, again, for quite a few years now. We used to have local conferences before COVID, and I wasn't necessarily talking this topic. I was talking other computational topics mostly. But it's not that hard to talk to people, and so give it a shot, and let's see what problems we can fix.
Nice. I love that. So, guys, go find something to read about, something that you're passionate about. It could be mathematics, it could be anything at all. Number two, be curious and find the thread in your day to day things because you might find something where you can find a solution and maybe even make it more efficient. And guess what's going to happen when you find that efficient way? You're going to start talking about it. And that's number three. Talk about what you found and what you're passionate about. So, really, really awesome. Thank you so much. I've got 6 really quick questions that we're going to
Okay.
jump through real quickly. All right. Number one, what is the one hobby that you wish you got into?
I'm pretty content with the way I actually am. I could definitely be more physically fit. Unfortunately, my joints don't really, they all wobble. But maybe I could have been more assiduous about that, and stayed on a better exercise path.
Sure. Absolutely. 2, what did you want to be when you were a child?
That's an odd thing about me, I guess. I never sort of wanted to be something when I was a kid. Again, I'm very content. I was perfectly happy being a child, and and a lot of my path has been happenstance, rather than planning. So
Gotcha.
I don't know that I would recommend that for people in general, but I personally have been very lucky with that, and I think that with with the sort of shifting in society of technology,
Yeah.
finding your opportunities as they come rather than planning for a future which might not be capable of arriving, um, is something that's worth at least considering.
Nice. Let's keep it really short. The answer short because I gotta
Sure.
run. My wife's like, I left the kid. I'm going upstairs. Can you come watch him? All right. Next question. What is your favorite movie or TV show?
Star Wars. Saw the opening run at 2 in the theaters, burned into my brain.
Nice.
Number
I love
one.
it. I should start with that question with every podcast because I just got the Lego, the helmet, the Lego helmets,
Okay.
Star Wars helmets.
Okay. So you can put like
Yeah.
little Darth Vader heads on people and stuff.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. What movie would you choose if you got to play a character in it?
Chariots of Fire.
Chariots of Fire.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. That movie just brings joy. And the characters, so many of them have such incredible journeys.
I love it. Next question. Who is your favorite superhero?
I'll go with Plastic Man.
Plastic Man. Oh my God. He's awesome.
Yes, he's funny and he is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if he was on if I wonder if he was in Arrowverse in the recent years or on the Flash.
I think they did. I think they did use a character with that name.
With ability, but I don't think they
that
called him
ability.
Plastic Man.
But yeah, they might not have been him.
Yeah. Because he was quite funny. Indeed.
Yeah. There was a cartoon when I was a kid for a very brief moment in time that had Plastic Man.
I think they're bringing him back. I saw something online somewhere about it. All right, last question. If you were a board game, what would it be?
Well, I would hope for something like Go, I think.
All right. I'll have to look up this new board game called Go. I'm sure it's pretty awesome.
Well, Go is the oldest board game in the world, actually. It's a
wow.
Chinese game of territorial control. It involves pieces being placed on a board that's 19 by 19. And only just recently, AI techniques actually allowed computers to go from being much, much worse than human beings at the game to much, much better at human beings at the game.
Of course, they're constantly learning.
Yes.
Fantastic. All right. Perfect. Thank you so much, Noah, for your time and energy and sharing your knowledge with us. This has been a fun conversation. Where can my audience find you?
Well, I have a website at cordisc.com, CORDISC. You can find me on LinkedIn at Noah Healy. I'm the oldest Noah Healy in the world, according to Google. So most Noah Healys online are me. And I have an email, noahphealy@yahoo.com. Drop me a line.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Noah, for your time. Let's chat soon, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Great.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. We had a really awesome conversation with Noah Healy. If you have any questions, please check the show notes for links, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to Hacks and Hobbies. You can find additional information on the guest today on the website hacksandhobbies.com. Please feel free to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on upcoming interviews with amazing guests.